Greetings, cozy knights. Lower your swords and rest by the fire. Tonight, we journey through the darkest corners of the lands between, uncovering theories that reveal the true horror lurking beneath Elden Ring's surface. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're listening from tonight. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our next adventure. Godwyn's soul was consumed by the greater will. The official story tells us Godwyn's soul died during the Night of Black Knives while his body lived on. But what if his soul didn't simply cease to exist? Some theorists suggest the greater will consumed Godwyn's soul to prevent him from becoming a threat. As the most beloved demigod and skilled warrior who befriended dragons, Godwyn represented a unifying force that could have challenged the established order. By orchestrating his spiritual death, the greater will eliminated someone who might have repaired the Elden Ring on terms favorable to mortals rather than gods. The Black Knife assassins were Marika's personal guard. Item descriptions note, the Black Knife assassins were Numen women rumored to be close to Queen Marika, who herself was Numen. This suggests a disturbing possibility that these assassins weren't hired mercenaries but members of Marika's own inner circle. She may have personally selected and trained the women who would murder her own son, making Godwyn's assassination an inside job orchestrated by his own mother to further her rebellion against the greater will. Ranni intended multiple demigods to die. While Ranni's ritual required one body and one soul to die, creating two half-deaths. Some theorists believe she originally planned for more demigods to perish that night. The plural gods in certain item descriptions, combined with the sheer number of assassins employed, suggests the Night of Black Knives could have been far bloodier. Perhaps other demigods survived only through luck or intervention. And Ranni's plan was actually meant to destabilize the entire divine hierarchy in a single night. Godwyn knew he would be assassinated. Evidence suggests Godwyn may have had foreknowledge of his impending death. His elite guard, the Golden Knights, seemingly divided in their loyalties after his death, with some serving the Prince of Death, while others fought to stop it. This could imply Godwyn gave specific instructions before dying, perhaps accepting his role as a sacrifice for a greater purpose he understood but couldn't prevent. The curse mark was meant to be whole. The curse mark of death splitting between Godwyn and Ranni wasn't the intended outcome. Some believe the ritual went wrong, creating an unstable condition where neither death was complete. This accident gave birth to those who live in death and the spreading death-blight corruption. If the curse mark had remained whole, true death might have returned to the lands between without the horrific side effects of undeath plaguing the world. Fortisax was driven mad by guilt. Ancient dragon Fortisax entered Godwyn's deathbed dream not just out of loyalty, but consumed by guilt over failing to protect his friend. The dragon's corruption by death wasn't merely a consequence of fighting the blight within Godwyn. Instead, Fortisax allowed itself to be corrupted, choosing to share Godwyn's suffering rather than abandon him to eternal torment alone. Those who live in death worship a false god. The undead who worship Godwyn as the Prince of Death believe he will return and lead them to salvation. But Godwyn's soul is gone, utterly destroyed. What they're actually worshipping is a soulless corpse, spreading corruption like a disease. Their faith is tragically misplaced, directed towards something that can never answer their prayers or fulfill their hopes for liberation from their cursed existence. Rogier's paralysis is Godwyn's revenge. Rogier investigates the face of Godwyn beneath Stormveil Castle and becomes afflicted with deathblight in his legs. Rather than simple corruption, Some theorize this represents Godwyn's body instinctively defending itself, lashing out at those who disturb it. Rogier's scholarly curiosity led him to poke at something that retained enough awareness to strike back. The face beneath Stormveil is Godwyn's eye. The grotesque face emerging from the roots beneath Stormveil Castle might not be a replicated visage, but actually Godwyn's watching eye. His corruption has spread so extensively that he can literally see through multiple manifestations across the lands between. Every face in the roots isn't a copy, but an actual sensory organ, meaning Godwyn silently observes the world that continues without his soul. Fia planned to use the Tarnished all along, the deathbed companion. Fia seems genuinely caring, but her entire interaction with the Tarnished could be calculated manipulation. She needed someone to retrieve half the curse mark from Ranni's corpse and kill her protectors. Every embrace, every gentle word might have been a performance to secure the Tarnished's aid in birthing a mending rune that would make undeath the natural state. Miquella tried and failed to save Godwyn. The golden epitaph weapon description reveals Miquella wished Godwyn could die a true death. Evidence suggests Miquella didn't just wish for this, but actively attempted to restore his half-brother, utilizing his unalloyed gold and divine abilities. The fact that Godwyn remains in his corrupted state implies even Miquella's prodigious powers failed against the fundamental wrongness of a half-death. This failure may have driven Miquella to more desperate measures later. Godwyn's corruption will eventually consume everything. The spreading of Godwyn's death blight appears to be accelerating rather than slowing. His face appears in more locations, deathroot sprouts in new areas, and the corruption touches more creatures. Some theorists believe this is irreversible and will eventually consume the entire lands between, transforming the world into a realm of undeath, regardless of which ending the Tarnished chooses. Godwyn's half-death may be the true apocalypse, not the frenzied flame. The merchants were innocent before their burial. The official story suggests the great caravan was buried alive for heretical beliefs connected to the frenzied flame. But item descriptions leave room for another interpretation. The merchants might have been completely innocent, falsely accused based on suspicion and prejudice. Only after being sealed underground in darkness, facing slow death by starvation and madness, did they actually summon the three fingers in their desperation. Their persecution created the very thing the Golden Order feared. Shabriri orchestrated the merchant genocide. Shabriri, the man whose slander was so grievous his eyes were gouged out, may have been the one who falsely accused the merchants. His deceptive nature and role as agent of chaos suggests he deliberately manufactured evidence or spread rumors that led to the great caravan's imprisonment. He created martyrs whose suffering would summon the frenzied flame, using their deaths as fuel for chaos. Merchant Kale knows the truth. Merchant Kale, one of the first NPCs you meet, is unusually well informed and hints at knowing darker truths. Cut content reveals he was meant to discover what happened to his people and confront the player about their role in a world built on the merchant's suffering. His questline was removed perhaps because it made the Golden Order's atrocities too explicit, forcing players to acknowledge their complicity in a system built on genocide. The three fingers are a fragment of the greater will. The two fingers represent the greater will's guidance, but what are the three fingers? The most disturbing theory suggests they're not an opposing force, but a severed part of the greater will itself. Together, they make 5 fingers, a complete hand. The greater will may have intentionally divided itself, creating the frenzied flame as a failsafe to destroy everything if its order was threatened. This means chaos isn't rebellion, but another form of divine control. The frenzied flame offers false unity. The frenzied flame promises to melt away all that divides and distinguishes, creating unity through the elimination of individuality. But this isn't salvation from suffering. It's the annihilation of existence itself. Some theorists suggest this apparent mercy is actually the cruelest outcome, erasing not just life but the very meaning and memory of everything that ever existed. It's not unity but oblivion wearing a mask of compassion. Hieta is inhabited by Shabriri. Blind Maiden, Hieta appears after Irina's death, and some players theorize she isn't a separate person, but Shabriri, wearing Irina's corpse like a disguise. The timing of her appearance, her consumption of grapes that are actually eyes, and her ultimate goal of guiding the tarnished to the three fingers all suggest Shabriri's manipulation. Irina's tragic death wasn't random, but orchestrated to create a puppet. Vike was manipulated by love. Knight Vike came closer to becoming Elden Lord than anyone before the player character, but he abandoned his quest to save his maiden from being burned as kindling. This sounds noble, but some theorize Shabriri specifically targeted Vike by convincing him the frenzied flame could save his beloved. Vike's love was weaponized against him, turning the strongest tarnished into an agent of chaos through emotional manipulation rather than force. The frenzied flame village chose madness. The village in northern Leonia, afflicted by the frenzied flame, didn't fall victim to madness. They embraced it willingly. Their tower inflicts madness on approaching outsiders, suggesting a defensive posture protecting their chosen way of life. These villagers may have concluded that madness was preferable to the cruelty and suffering under the Golden Order's rule, making a conscious decision to let chaos take them. Fingerprint marks aren't from fingers. The fingerprint burns on Vike's armor and shield supposedly come from the three fingers' touch. But some theorists note the prints are too large and oddly shaped. What if they're not from fingers, but from something else entirely? The three fingers might be a metaphor or nickname for something far more alien and incomprehensible that the human mind simply interprets as fingers. The Cathedral of the Forsaken is a prison for the three fingers. The elaborate seals and hidden location of the cathedral suggest the three fingers aren't residing there by choice, but imprisoned. The Greater Will's forces may have captured and bound this entity deep underground, yet its influence still seeps out. The tarnished removing their armor to enter represents stripping away the Greater Will's protection, making yourself vulnerable to something that's desperately hungry for freedom after eons of captivity. Melina's purple eye is from the frenzied flame. If you accept the frenzied flame, Melina abandons you but promises to deliver destined death. Her closed eye opens, revealing purple coloring associated with destined death. But consider where she goes and what she plans. Some theorize Melina herself has some connection to the frenzied flame's opposite force, suggesting she's been preparing for this possibility all along. Her true nature and purpose may be far darker than she reveals. Miquella's needle can't truly cure madness. Miquella's needle can suppress outer god influence, including the frenzied flame, but only in Farum Azula, a place beyond time. This isn't actually a cure, but temporary suppression that requires maintaining yourself in a temporal anomaly. The moment you return to normal time, the frenzied flame could reassert itself. You're not freed from madness, but perpetually holding it back through superhuman effort. The merchants wanted to summon madness. A darker reading of the merchant's story suggests they didn't summon the frenzied flame in desperation, but deliberately. Perhaps they studied forbidden knowledge before their imprisonment, and their burial gave them the perfect conditions to perform a ritual. Their apparent innocence might be carefully crafted propaganda, and they were actually dangerous cultists who got exactly what they wanted, a chance to unleash chaos on the world that wronged them. Marika shattered the ring to prevent something worse. Queen Marika's shattering of the Elden Ring is portrayed as rebellion or madness, but some theories suggest it was a calculated move to prevent an even darker outcome. Perhaps Marika foresaw the Greater Will's true plans for the lands between, something so horrific that shattering reality itself seemed preferable. The shattering wasn't destruction, but a desperate attempt to freeze the world before it could transform into something unutterably worse. Radagon tried to stop Marika, but was too late. Radagon and Marika are the same entity, yet Radagon attempted to repair the Elden Ring after Marika shattered it. This internal conflict suggests two personalities with opposing goals, sharing one divine body. Radagon's attempts at repair might represent him trying to wrestle control from Marika and undo her sabotage, but he arrived at consciousness too late to prevent the shattering, only able to attempt futile repairs afterward. Marika killed her own children. Deliberately, Marika lost Godwyn to assassination, but what if she orchestrated more than just his death? Her children waging war and destroying each other during the shattering could have been her intended outcome. By removing the demigods from power, Marika might have been clearing the board for the tarnished, weaker beings unconnected to the corrupted divine bloodline, to create something new. Every dead demigod might be part of her plan. Marika was imprisoned long before the shattering. When we find Marika Radagon, they're impaled on a rune arc and completely immobile. Some theorize this imprisonment didn't happen after the shattering, but long before. The Greater Will may have been puppeting Marika's body for years or even centuries, with the real Marika trapped as a consciousness, watching her body enact the Greater Will's designs. The shattering might have been her first moment of genuine agency in ages. Marika created the tarnished as weapons. Marika stripped Godfrey and his warriors of grace, exiling them to become tarnished. This seemed like punishment, but it was actually preparation. By removing grace, she freed them from the Greater Will's direct control. Marika created an army of beings who could operate outside the Greater Will's sight, invisible pieces she could eventually call back to challenge the gods themselves. Every tarnished is a living weapon she forged centuries in advance. Melina is Marika's backup plan. Melina claims to be searching for her purpose, guided by her mother at the foot of the Erd Tree. She serves as the tarnisked's maiden, despite the systems supposedly being broken. Some theorists believe Melina is Marika's daughter, created specifically as insurance, a guide who would activate if everything went according to plan. Melina isn't following her own path, but executing programming Marika installed before the shattering. Marika and the Glomide Queen were allies. Before Malekith defeated her, the Glomide Queen wielded destined death and led the Godskin Apostles. Traditional interpretation casts her as Marika's enemy, but what if they worked together? Marika might have arranged her defeat and the sealing of destined death as part of a longer plan. The Glomide Queen could have been Marika's co-conspirator, someone willing to lose a battle to win a longer war. Marika's children were never meant to succeed. Looking at Marika's children, they're all cursed or damaged in profound ways. Mog and Morgoth born as omens, Millennia afflicted with rot, Miquella trapped in childhood, Godwyn murdered. Some theorize Marika deliberately created flawed heirs who could never truly threaten the established order. Each child was born with a weakness that would prevent them from becoming what she needed, leaving the path clear for the tarnished. The Erdtree has been dead for centuries. The Erdtree we see might be a magnificent corpse, sustained only by illusion and desperate magic. Its golden glow could be a facade hiding something rotted and hollow. This would explain why the Erdtree refuses entry, why it must be burned, and why the world is dying despite its apparent presence. The Erdtree died long ago, and everyone has been living in denial, worshipping a beautiful lie. Marika wanted the Tarnished to kill her. The final boss fight pits you against Radagon defending the Elden Ring, then the Elden Beast. But what if Marika's consciousness was silently cheering for your victory? By defeating her body and the Elden Beast, the Tarnished frees Marika from centuries of imprisonment and prevents the Greater Will from maintaining its grip on reality. Your victory might be exactly what Marika planned and prayed for. Marika is still alive. Inside the Elden Ring, after defeating the Elden Beast, the player interacts with Marika's headless corpse to access the Elden Ring. But some theorists note that Marika might not be dead, but transformed. Her consciousness could reside within the Elden Ring itself now, meaning every Tarnished who becomes Elden Lord is essentially hosting Marika's will. You don't replace her, but become her vessel. The Golden Order's laws were deliberately imperfect. Marika established laws that seem designed to create suffering. Omens are cursed, the Tarnished exiled, merchants persecuted. These might not be mistakes, but deliberate pressure points. By creating groups with legitimate grievances, Marika ensured instability that would eventually tear her order apart. She built structural weaknesses into the system, planting seeds of inevitable rebellion. The shattering wasn't the first time. Ancient items and lore hints suggest cycles of destruction and renewal in the Lands Between's deep history. The shattering might be just the most recent in a series of apocalyptic events. Marika could have known this pattern, realized she was doomed to be another iteration in an endless cycle, and shattered the ring in an attempt to break the pattern itself rather than play her predetermined role. Millennia bloomed intentionally against Radahn. Millennia's bloom in Caelid is usually presented as a desperate last resort, when she couldn't defeat Radahn through skill alone. But consider that Millennia could have intentionally journeyed to Caelid with the specific purpose of blooming. She wasn't there to defeat Radahn honorably, but to eliminate him and his region, sacrificing Caelid as a strategic move in the larger war. Her honor as Miquella's blade meant completing her mission by any means necessary. Millennia has bloomed more than twice. Item descriptions mention Millennia's third bloom will transform her into the Scarlet Aeonia, the goddess of rot. We witness her second bloom during the boss fight. But what if she's already bloomed multiple times before Caelid? The evidence we see could be incomplete, and Millennia might be much closer to her third bloom than anyone realizes, meaning she's one trigger away from becoming a true goddess. The Cleanrot Knights volunteered. Millennia's Cleanrot Knights suffer from scarlet rot due to their proximity to her, existing in a state between life and death. Traditional interpretation suggests this was an unfortunate consequence of their loyalty. But what if they volunteered, knowing exactly what would happen? These knights might have chosen undeath as the price of serving Millennia, willingly sacrificing their humanity for their cause. Malenia sought Radon to trigger her bloom. Taking the previous theories further, what if Malenia specifically sought out Radon because she knew he was strong enough to push her to bloom? She needed a catalyst for her transformation, and Radon was the perfect opponent, strong enough to force her hand but vulnerable enough that her bloom would neutralize him. Caelid's destruction was acceptable collateral damage. Malenia's prosthetics are prisons. Miquella created unalloyed gold prosthetics to replace Malenia's rotted limbs. But some theorists suggest these aren't just replacements, but restraints. The prosthetics might suppress her rot, preventing her from blooming uncontrollably. Each golden limb is a seal keeping the goddess from emerging. When Malenia removes her prosthetic arm before her second phase, she's not just getting serious, she's removing one of the locks Miquella placed on her power. The Scarlet Rot wants Malenia to die. The outer god of Rot has chosen Malenia as its vessel, but her resistance through sheer will prevents full possession. Some believe the Rot actively wants Malenia to die, so it can birth the goddess of Rot from her corpse. Every bloom brings her closer to death, and the god of Rot is patient, knowing Malenia can't resist forever. Her third bloom won't be transformation, but death and replacement. Malenia remembers every fight she loses. Malenia proclaims she has never known defeat, but players defeat her repeatedly. One disturbing theory suggests she does remember losing, but her pride or the Rot's influence causes her to deny reality. Each death could be adding to her madness, creating false memories where she won, meaning Malenia is slowly losing her grip on truth itself. Malenia is already dead. Some theorists propose that Malenia actually died in Caelid, and what we fight is already a walking corpse animated by scarlet rot. Her proclamation of never knowing defeat comes from a being who doesn't realize she's already lost the ultimate battle against death itself. The boss we face isn't Malenia anymore, but a puppet of rot wearing her shape. Miquella wanted to become an outer god. Miquella's unalloyed gold resists outer god's influence, suggesting he opposed them. But consider an alternative. Miquella studied outer gods to become one himself. His Haligtree was meant to replace the Erd Tree, and he embedded himself in it, not to heal, but to transform. Miquella's plan might have been ascending to godhood himself, creating a new outer god free from the corruption of the existing ones. Finlay died carrying Malenia home, Clean Rot Knight. Finlay carried unconscious Malenia from Caelid back to the Haligtree, a journey of incredible distance while fighting off enemies. The fact that we only encounter Finlay as a spirit ash suggests she didn't survive this journey. Finlay died somewhere along the route, but her spirit, animated by loyalty and rot, continued carrying Malenia's body until reaching home, achieving her mission even in death. Malenia hunts the player between attempts. When players rest at grace sites after dying to Malenia, she resets to her starting position. But some players jokingly theorize she's actually hunting through the Haligtree for you between attempts. Every time you sit at grace, Malenia is searching the tree, and her patience at waiting at the fight location is because she knows you'll return. She's not resetting, but choosing to wait at the place you're strongest, giving you every advantage and still confident in victory. The Haligtree was already dying before Mog's intrusion. Mog kidnapping Miquella is blamed for the Haligtree's decline, but evidence suggests the tree was already failing. Miquella's embedding plan might have been flawed from the start, the unalloyed gold unable to sustain divine life. Mog's theft simply accelerated an inevitable collapse, and Miquella might have known his plan was failing before he was taken. Miquella knew Mog would take him. Expanding that theory, what if Miquella deliberately made himself vulnerable because he wanted Mog to kidnap him? Realizing his Haligtree plan was failing, Miquella might have seen Mog's blood magic as an alternative path to godhood. He let himself be taken, using Mog's obsession as a tool for his own transformation, manipulating his half-brother from within the cocoon. Saint Trina is Miquella's discarded compassion. Saint Trina and Miquella share a connection, with Trina often interpreted as Miquella's alter ego. A darker reading suggests Saint Trina represents the compassionate, gentle aspects of Miquella's personality that he deliberately shed. To become a god, Miquella had to discard his humanity, and Saint Trina is the personification of everything kind and good he cut away to pursue his ambitions. The Haligtree refugees were experiments. Miquella gathered albinorics and outcasts to the Haligtree, presented as offering sanctuary. But some theories suggest these refugees were actually test subjects. Miquella needed to understand how his unalloyed gold and divine power affected different beings, using the desperate and powerless as guinea pigs in his research. His compassion might have been a facade hiding calculated exploitation. Miquella created the bewitching branch. Bewitching branches can charm enemies to fight for you temporarily. Some theorize Miquella created these, testing mind control methods that he would later use to build his gentle order. The branches might be failed experiments or prototypes, with Miquella planning to eventually charm all beings in the lands between into peaceful compliance, creating a world without war by removing free will itself. Mog genuinely loved Miquella. Mog's obsession with Miquella is usually portrayed as creepy and possessive, but consider that Mog might have genuinely loved his half-brother in his twisted way. As an omen rejected by his mother and society, Mog found in sleeping Miquella the one being who couldn't reject him. His dynasty plan might have been about creating a world where he and Miquella could exist together without judgment, a desperate act by someone who had never known acceptance. The formless mother chose Mog because of his suffering. The formless mother, the outer god of blood, selected Mog as her champion. Some theorize she specifically chose him because of his trauma from being imprisoned and mutilated as an omen child. The formless mother fed on his pain and rage, transforming his suffering into power. Every drop of blood Mog spills is laced with the agony of his own torment. Miquella's needles were flawed from the start. Miquella created needles to resist outer god's influence, using unalloyed gold that supposedly couldn't be corrupted. But the fact that millennia continued deteriorating and that the needles require specific conditions to work suggests they were never truly effective. Miquella might have known his solution was temporary at best, watching his sister and others suffer while desperately seeking better answers that never came. The Haligtree's architecture reveals Miquella's madness. The Haligtree's design grows more chaotic and impossible the higher you climb. Some theorize this reflects Miquella's deteriorating mental state as he embedded himself deeper into the tree. The nonsensical architecture isn't just game design, but a physical manifestation of a child god's mind breaking under the weight of impossible ambitions and accumulating failures. Rani killed herself to escape destiny. Rani's ritual involved killing her own body to escape the greater will's control. But some theories suggest her primary motivation wasn't rebellion but terror. As an Empyrean chosen to replace Marika, Rani would have seen what godhood did to her stepmother. the imprisonment and loss of self. Rani's suicide wasn't brave defiance, but desperate escape from a fate worse than death. Bled was always doomed. Bled, Rani's shadow, was created by the two fingers to serve and protect her, but also to kill her if she betrayed the greater will. Bled's eventual madness wasn't failure, but programming activating. He fought it with every shred of will, but his very existence was designed to ensure he would either die with Rani or destroy her. His loyalty and his nature were in fundamental conflict from the moment of his creation. E.g. sacrificed Bled, deliberately, war counselor. E.g. imprisoned Bled to protect him from his programming, but some theorize E.g. knew imprisonment wouldn't save him. E.g. might have locked Bled away knowing it would drive him mad, preferring that outcome to having Bled attack Rani directly. It was a calculated sacrifice of one friend to ensure another's survival. Rani's doll body is a prison. Rani inhabits a doll crafted in her mentor's image, presented as a clever solution to escape divine fate. But dolls have no flesh, no senses, no physical connection to the world. Some theorists suggest Rani's existence is torture, trapped in an unfeeling shell, while her consciousness remains fully aware. She's freed herself from destiny but condemned herself to a sensory deprivation that will last for eternity. Seluvis wanted to puppet Rani. Preceptor. Seluvis creates puppets from living beings and maintains a hidden collection. His attempted poisoning of Rani wasn't about money or power, but obsession. Seluvis wanted Rani as the crown jewel of his collection, planning to transform her into a puppet he could control. His betrayal wasn't just political, but deeply personal violation. Rani's mother remembers. Renala sits in her library cradling an amber egg, driven mad by Radagon's abandonment. But some theorize she maintains more awareness than she shows. Renala might know Rani killed her own body and triggered the shattering. Her retreat into madness could be willful, choosing fantasy over the unbearable reality that her daughter destroyed the world. The Age of Stars ending abandons mortals. Rani's ending takes the Elden Ring into the stars, removing gods from mortal affairs. This sounds liberating, but it also means removing all divine protection and guidance. Some theorists argue Rani's ending is just as cruel as the frenzied flame, leaving mortals completely alone in a hostile universe without any hope of divine intervention or purpose beyond what they create themselves. Rani plans to destroy the Elden Ring completely. Rani says she'll take the Elden Ring far away, but some believe she actually intends to destroy it. Her entire quest line involves killing, stealing, and betraying to escape the greater will's influence. Taking the ring into space might just be the first step before shattering it beyond all possibility of repair, ensuring no god can ever control the lands between again. Rani's Age of Stars is a lonely eternity. The player becomes Rani's consort in her ending, accompanying her into the dark spaces between stars. But consider what this means. Eternal existence in the void, with only each other for company, cut off from all other life. Rani's ending might condemn the Tarnished to an eternity of isolation, making them her only companion in an infinite, empty cosmos. Pedia was the original puppet master. Pedia serves Rani but seems to have knowledge of Seluvis's puppets. Some theorists believe Pedia taught Seluvis the art of making puppets, and might have originally created Rani's doll body itself. When we find Pedia being killed by puppets after Seluvis's death, it might be Seluvis's revenge against his teacher, using the puppets Pedia taught him to create. Morgoth loved the Golden Order that hated him. Morgoth the Grace, given, served as Laendel's secret defender despite being an omen imprisoned beneath the city. This loyalty is usually seen as tragic, but it's actually horrifying when you consider he served those who mutilated him as a child, imprisoned him in sewers, and created a society that viewed his existence as an abomination. Morgoth is a victim who internalized his abuse so completely, he became its defender. Morg's blood dynasty was a mercy. Morg's dynasty based on blood and madness seems evil, but some theorize it represented genuine acceptance. Morg welcomed those rejected by the Golden Order, offering power without judgment. His dynasty wasn't about domination, but creating a space where beings like himself, cursed and discarded, could exist without shame. His methods were dark, but his intentions might have been the liberation of the oppressed. Omen killer cleaver priests were once omen children. The omen killers who excise horns from omen children might themselves be former omens who underwent the procedure and survived. The trauma and pain of their own excision drove them to inflict it on others, creating a cycle where victims become victimizers. This makes the process even more cruel, using the mutilated to mutilate the next generation. Morgoth could have claimed the Erdtree. As Marika's son, Morgoth had legitimate claim to power, but his omen status barred him. Some theorize Morgoth actually could have entered the Erdtree and become Elden Lord if he wanted, but his internalized shame convinced him he was unworthy. His service wasn't defending his birthright, but guarding others' access to something he didn't believe he deserved. Omen horns are connected to Crucible. The Crucible represents primordial chaos before the Erdtree's order. Omen horns might be physical manifestations of Crucible power, making omens actually more connected to the lands between's original state than the Golden Order. The persecution of omens might be the Greater Will's attempt to erase evidence of what existed before its dominion. Dung Eater was driven mad by witnessing omen. Treatment. The Dung Eater's mission to curse all bloodlines could stem from witnessing how omens are treated. Rather than madness or evil, his defiling might be an attempt to make everyone share the curse, eliminating the hierarchy of suffering by ensuring everyone is equally cursed. It's monstrous logic, but it might come from a place of traumatized empathy taken to its darkest extreme. Omen horns grow back. Item descriptions mention omen horns being excised, but they might not be permanently removed. If horns grow back like fingernails, the excision might be an ongoing torture, requiring repeated procedures throughout an omen's life. Morgoth and Morg's impressive horns could represent years of regrowth after their childhood mutilations. The subterranean shunning grounds are a mass grave. The sewers beneath Leyndell contain countless omen corpses, but some theorize many of these bodies belong to omen children who were simply thrown away to die. The Golden Order's solution to common-born omens wasn't imprisonment, but disposal, tossing babies and children into the sewers to be forgotten. What we explore isn't a prison, but a cemetery. Morgoth's death breaks the Erdtree's seal. Defeating Morgoth allows access to the Erdtree, suggesting he maintained its barrier. Some theorists propose Morgoth volunteered to become the seal itself, transforming his cursed blood into a lock that protected the Erdtree. His death doesn't just remove an obstacle, but breaks a magical working that only someone of Marika's blood could have created. The Crucible Knights served omen gods. Crucible Knights served Godfrey and represent a connection to primordial power. Some theories suggest they originally served omen demigods before the Golden Order's full establishment, and their loyalty to Godfrey came from him accepting beings touched by Crucible power. The Crucible Knights might be the last remnants of an age when horns and tails were marks of divine favor rather than curses. The ancient dragons ruled before the Erd Tree. Farum Azula's ruins show a civilization built around dragon worship that clearly predated the Golden Order. Some theories suggest dragons weren't just powerful creatures, but the original rulers of the lands between. The Greater Will's arrival and the Erd Tree's planting might have been an invasion, with the dragon's defeat representing conquest rather than a natural transition of power. Placidusax's missing heads were stolen. Dragon Lord Placidusax has multiple heads missing, with scars suggesting violent removal rather than natural loss. Some theorists believe the Greater Will or early champions of the Golden Order literally tore off these heads as proof of defeating the Old Order. Each missing head represents a conquest, a piece of the dragon's power taken as a trophy. Dragons can't truly die. Ancient dragons possess stone scales, and when killed, they become stone themselves. This might suggest dragons don't actually die, but petrify, entering a dormant state. Every dragon corpse could potentially reawaken given proper circumstances, meaning the dragon war never truly ended, just paused until conditions allow ancient stone to crack and roar again. The Beastmen were dragonkin. The Beastmen's servants in Forum Azula might not have been a separate species, but dragons who underwent some transformation or devolution. Their loyal service to dragons makes more sense if they were once dragons themselves, reduced in power and form, but still retaining memory of their former greatness. Fortisax taught. Godwyn, lightning. Godwyn befriended Fortisax after defeating him in combat, leading to the dragon cult in Lendel. But some theories suggest this friendship went deeper, with Fortisax personally teaching Godwyn to wield lightning as a sign of trust and respect. The golden lightning Godwyn wielded might have been a gift from his dragon friend, making Fortisax's later corruption even more tragic. Dragons breathed. Lightning before fire. Modern dragons breathe fire, but ancient dragons used lightning. This might represent a degradation over time, with the ancient dragon's superior nature manifesting in their more primal lightning attacks. Fire-breathing dragons could be lesser descendants, weaker versions that lost access to the storm power their ancestors commanded. Lanciax was in love with Vyke. Ancient dragon Lanciax took human form and taught dragon cult incantations to knights like Vyke. Some theorists suggest that her interest in Vyke specifically went beyond mentorship to genuine affection. Vyke's fall to the frenzied flame might have broken Lanciax's heart, explaining why she appears hostile when encountered, corrupted not by madness, but grief. The Dragon Communion churches are mass graves. Dragon Communion allows mortals to gain dragon powers by consuming dragon hearts. The churches facilitating this practice might be built atop mass graves of dragons slaughtered during the war. Each communion ritual connects to this hidden cemetery, making players unwitting participants in a form of ritualized cannibalism of a defeated people. Farum Azula exists in all times. Farum Azula is said to exist outside normal time, but some theorize it exists in all times simultaneously. Every moment of its history, from construction to ruin, might be happening concurrently. The crumbling you see isn't decay, but all stages of its existence layered over each other, creating an architectural paradox. Dragons knew the Beast Clergyman's secret. The Beast Clergyman inhabits Farum Azula, later revealed as Malekith. Dragons might have always known his true identity and the danger he represented, yet allowed him to remain. This could suggest an alliance or treaty between ancient dragons and Marika, with Faramazula serving as neutral ground where both sides' agents could coexist. Nokron's fall was genocide. The eternal city of Nokron was buried underground as punishment for an unspecified transgression. But what if this wasn't divine justice, but genocide? The greater will might have deemed an entire civilization too dangerous or heretical to exist and buried them alive, literally erasing them from the surface world in an act of mass murder. The silver tears are artificial life. Silver tears found underground can take any form, suggesting they're not natural beings but created ones. The eternal cities might have achieved artificial life creation, and this accomplishment threatened the greater will's monopoly on creation. The cities were buried to suppress this technology and prevent mortals from achieving the power to create life. Mimics remember being human. Mimic tears can perfectly replicate others, leading to theories they were once people transformed into shapeshifters. If true, each mimic tear retains memories of their original form but can never return to it. They're condemned to endlessly copy others while remembering who they used to be. The Fingerslayer blade was used before. Nokron forged a blade specifically to kill the two fingers, suggesting they had reason to want these agents dead. The blade's existence implies the eternal cities might have already killed fingers in the past, making their burial punishment for succeeded regicide against the greater will's representatives rather than attempted rebellion. Rani needed Nokron's technology. Rani's quest requires retrieving the Fingerslayer blade from Nokron, but some theorize she also needed the city's knowledge. The puppet technology, soul manipulation, and resistance to divine influence that Nokron developed might have been essential to Rani's plans. She might have studied with Eternal City survivors before the game's events. The Lake of Rot underneath is older than the Erd Tree. The Lake of Rot exists deep underground, connected to the outer god of Rot. Some theories propose this predates the Erd Tree and even the Eternal Cities. The Rot might be the Lands Between's original state, with the Erd Tree literally built over a suppressed god, explaining why Rot spreads when the Erd Tree's power wanes. The Nox were Numen. The Nox people of the Eternal Cities might have been Numen like Marika and the Black Knife Assassins. This would make the city's burial an act of civil war, Marika turning against her own people, who refused to accept the Greater Will's order. The Eternal Cities could be Numen, who chose different paths. Astal destroyed multiple cities. Astal, the natural born of the Void, appears in different locations, suggesting multiple entities or one that exists in multiple places. This creature might have been the weapon that destroyed the Eternal Cities, a living cataclysm unleashed by the Greater Will to punish those who defied divine order. The Eternal Cities wanted to create their own god. Some item descriptions suggest the Nox wanted to create a Lord of Night. This might not mean summoning a god, but creating one artificially, using their advanced technology to manufacture a deity under their control. Their ambition to make gods rather than serve them might have been their unforgivable sin. The ancestral followers predate everything. Underground areas contain ancestral followers worshipping spirits and practicing what appears to be the Lands Between's oldest religion. These beings might remember a time before Erd Tree, before dragons, before even the Eternal Cities. They're remnants of the original inhabitants, pushed underground by successive waves of conquerors. The death root corrupts more than bodies. Those who live in death are usually portrayed as pitiable undead, but some theories suggest the corruption affects their minds and souls too. The undead might retain some memories, but lack proper consciousness, creating beings that mimic life while possessing no actual awareness. They're philosophical zombies, perfect imitations with nothing inside. Gurranq is slowly transforming. Feeding deathroot to the beast clergyman causes him to become more aggressive and eventually attack you. Some theorists believe this represents Gurranq slowly transforming into something else, corrupted by the very death he consumes. His hunger for deathroot might be an addiction that's changing his fundamental nature. The mariner's spirits are former death priests. Tibia mariners pilot skeleton boats and summon undead. They might be spirits of priests who once conducted proper death rites before the system broke. Now they endlessly perform corrupted versions of their original duties, ferrying the dead, but unable to complete the journey or grant true rest. Godwyn's followers chose undeath. Some of the undead might have voluntarily accepted corruption, choosing to become those who live in death, rather than submit to the Tree's order. For beings who saw the Golden Order as oppressive, undeath might represent freedom, making them rebels rather than victims. Death blight spreads through touch. The death status effect can spread between characters, suggesting Godwyn's corruption is literally contagious. Every undead created might become a new vector for spreading death blight, meaning the problem grows exponentially. Left unchecked, eventually every being in the lands between could become afflicted. Rosas's axe represents failed mercy. Rosus, a cleric, created an axe to grant rest to those who live in death. The weapon's existence suggests the church acknowledged the undead's suffering and attempted mercy killings. That this solution failed, with undead continuing to rise, speaks to the futility of fighting Godwyn's curse through conventional means. The mausoleums house unworthy dead. Walking mausoleums contain demigods who died without grace. Some theories suggest these aren't honored dead, but exiled ones. Demigods deemed unworthy even of Tree burial. The mausoleums endlessly walk as punishment, preventing the bodies from ever finding rest. Fire's curse might be mercy. Fear lies with those who live in death, granting them a form of comfort. Her ending introduces life within death as a legitimate path, making undeath not a curse, but an alternative existence. From this perspective, Godwyn didn't create a plague, but accidentally opened a new form of being that deserves recognition. The Greater Will never loved the lands between. The Greater Will is often portrayed as a distant god, but some theories suggest it's actively malicious. It might view the lands between as an experiment or tool, with no genuine care for its inhabitants. Every suffering imposed might be calculated rather than collateral damage, designed to see how much torture beings can endure. The Elden Ring is a parasite, rather than a gift. The Elden Ring might be how the Greater Will infects a world. It offers power and order, but at the cost of autonomy, slowly transforming civilizations into vessels for its will. The shattering might represent a world's immune system, finally rejecting a foreign invasion. The Two Fingers have been dead for centuries. The two fingers you encounter don't move or speak beyond vague gestures. Some theorize they died long ago, and the Greater Will has been out of contact for ages. Everything done in the Greater Will's name might be based on ancient, outdated instructions from an absent god that no longer cares. The Greater Will wants the Elden Ring shattered. What if the shattering was the Greater Will's actual plan all along? The chaos and suffering might feed it in some way, or perhaps it needed the ring shattered to achieve some incomprehensible goal. Marika thought she was rebelling, but she played exactly into the Greater Will's design. Destined death was the greater will's weakness. Marika sealing away destined death might not have been about creating immortality, but hiding the greater will's vulnerability. True death might be the one force that can harm or kill outer gods. By removing death from the Elden Ring, the greater will protected itself from the only thing it feared. The greater will has multiple aspects. Different fingers represent different aspects of the greater will's power. Some theories suggest the greater will isn't one entity, but a collective consciousness, with each aspect pursuing different and sometimes contradictory goals. The chaos in the lands between might reflect internal conflict within the god itself. The Golden Order's fundamentalism hides dark truths. Goldmask studies the Golden Order's fundamentals and discovers imperfections, ultimately creating a mending rune for perfect order. But what if these imperfections were hidden truths about the greater will's nature? Goldmask might have learned something so disturbing that his rune isn't fixing the order, but hiding evidence. The Elden Beast is a weapon. The Elden Beast is called a living vassal of the greater will, but its monstrous form suggests it might be a weapon rather than an envoy. The greater will might have sent it to conquer and subjugate, with the Elden Ring serving as a control mechanism to keep conquered worlds obedient. The greater will feeds on faith. Some theorists propose the greater will literally consumes worship and faith as sustenance. The Golden Order and all its religious apparatus exist to generate belief that feeds a cosmic entity. Wars and suffering strengthen devotion, making conflict desirable from the greater will's perspective, as it creates more intense faith. The Erdtree rejects players. Because the greater will is dead, the Erdtree refuses entry until burned, suggesting something is fundamentally wrong. Some believe the greater will actually died at some point, and the Erdtree's rejection reflects a system running on autopilot without its creator. Everything players do might be trying to restart or replace a god that no longer exists. The Formless Mother seeks to replace the greater will. Mog's patron, the Formless Mother, might not be content ruling just blood, but wants to supplant the greater will entirely. Her support of Mog's dynasty could be preparation for taking over the lands between once the current order collapses, making her less an alternative and more an opportunistic conqueror. The god of Rot plans to outlast other gods. Rot represents decay and transformation, suggesting patience. The outer god of Rot might be playing a longer game than other entities, knowing that decay eventually claims everything. It doesn't need to fight other gods directly, but can simply wait for them to rot away naturally over eons. The twin-bird goddess of death was murdered. Death-right birds serve the twin-bird, a goddess of death mentioned in item descriptions. This goddess seems absent or dead herself, leading to theories that the greater will had her killed to monopolize control over death through Malekith and the Rune of Death. Outer gods are competing for hosts. Each outer god seeks to influence the lands between through chosen champions like Millennia for Rot or Mog for the Formless Mother. They might be competing to see which can establish dominance, treating the world as a battlefield for divine supremacy, where mortals are just pieces in their game. The One Great was shattered into outer gods. Yeta speaks of the One Great, from which all things came. Some theories suggest the outer gods are fragments of this original unity, each representing an aspect that became separated. The greater will, frenzied flame, and all others might be trying to reunite, with the lands between as the battleground for cosmic reunion. The fell god is imprisoned but not dead. The giants worshipped the fell god of flame, but it was defeated and seemingly destroyed. Item descriptions suggest it might be imprisoned rather than dead, locked away like the frenzied flame's three fingers. The giant flame that burns the Tree might be this god's influence leaking out. Outer gods can't enter the lands between directly. All outer gods seem to work through intermediaries and avatars, rather than manifesting directly. They might be physically unable to enter this reality fully, explaining why they need mortal champions and complex rituals. The lands between might have natural defenses that keep them out. The Gloam-eyed Queen served another outer god. Before being defeated by Malekith, the Gloam-eyed Queen wielded destined death and led the Godskins. She might have been champion of yet another outer god, one associated with death itself. Her defeat might represent the greater will eliminating a rival god's influence. The stars are actually outer gods. Selen and others reference stars having wills and the power to determine fates. These might not be metaphorical, but literal. The stars could be outer gods themselves or vessels containing them. Radan holding stars in place might have been preventing outer god invasions. There are outer gods we never encounter. The game explicitly shows only a few outer gods, but item descriptions hint at many more. Entire pantheons of cosmic entities might exist beyond what players see, each with their own incomprehensible agendas and horror that dwells in spaces between what the game reveals. The Tree slowly drains life force. The Tree is beautiful and majestic, but some theorize it's actually parasitic. The golden glow might represent energy. It's draining from the land and people, explaining why the world appears so lifeless and barren. The Tree sustains itself by slowly consuming the vitality of everything around it. Deathroot creates a hive mind. Those who live in death connected through Deathroot might share a collective consciousness. Godwyn's corruption could be creating a network where all undead share thoughts and experiences, with Godwyn as the center of a growing hive mind that will eventually encompass all life. Caelid's scarlet rot is spreading faster than anyone realizes. Caelid appears contained, but close examination shows rot creeping into neighboring regions. The corruption might be advancing steadily, consuming more land daily. Within centuries or even decades, the rot could cover the entire lands between, transforming it into a scarlet wasteland. The Lake of Rot is expanding. Deep underground, the Lake of Rot might be growing, its boundaries pushing outward through caverns and fissures. This expansion could eventually breach the surface, flooding areas with liquid rot that would make Caelid look like a garden by comparison. The ailing village chose madness to escape rot. The frenzied flame village near Caelid might have embraced madness specifically to escape Scarlet Rot's influence. Faced with watching their loved ones dissolve into rotting corpses, they chose the quick annihilation of chaos over slow death by plague, finding mercy in madness. Runes are literally made from souls. The runes players collect from defeated enemies might be fragments of their souls. Every level up could involve consuming pieces of consciousness, making player growth literally powered by devouring others' essence. The strongest tarnished are those who have consumed the most souls. The lands between is hell for another world. Some theories propose the lands between isn't a normal world, but an afterlife or purgatory for beings from elsewhere. Every tarnished, every NPC might be dead souls sent here for punishment or testing, explaining the endless respawning and the surreal nature of reality. Corpses create Tree roots. Bodies buried beneath minor trees feed the tree's growth. But what if this process is more horrible? The corpses might literally transform into roots, their physical bodies becoming part of the tree structure. Every root could be someone who was buried, their remains repurposed into plant matter. Grace points to whatever will create the most suffering. Sites of grace guide, tarnished along specific paths, but their guidance might not be benevolent. Grace could deliberately lead people toward maximum conflict and suffering, pointing toward choices that will create the most chaos, because that serves some dark purpose. The tarnished has died thousands of times before the game starts. Every tarnished summoned back has failed repeatedly before you. The protagonist might have already died countless times in previous attempts, with each resurrection erasing memory of prior failures. Your current playthrough could be iteration 10,000 and you'd never know. Melina burns. Forever. If Melina sacrifices herself at the forge, she burns as kindling to light the Erdtree aflame. Some theories suggest she doesn't simply die, but burns eternally, trapped in endless agony as fuel for the flame. Her sacrifice isn't quick death, but infinite suffering. Patches survives because he's cursed. Patches appears across multiple From Software games, suggesting something beyond normal existence. He might be cursed with immortality or exist outside normal reality, condemned to endlessly repeat his pattern of betrayal and cowardice across different worlds and timelines. The Roundtable Hold exists outside space. The Roundtable Hold doesn't appear on any map and seems to exist separately from the normal world. It might exist in a pocket dimension or outside time entirely, explaining why it never changes regardless of what happens in the lands between. Everyone visiting it might be stepping briefly out of reality. Vare recruits for Mog Knowing. It's a death sentence. White Mask. Vare sends Tarnished to Mogwin Palace, presenting it as opportunity. But he likely knows most won't survive the journey or the horrors they'll face there. His recruitment might be deliberately sending disposable pawns to die for his lord's amusement. Boggart was Raya's father. Blackguard Big Boggart demonstrates surprising affection for Raya, warning her about danger and showing unusual care. Some fans theorize he's actually her biological father, explaining his protective behavior. His death, while protecting her, takes on even darker meaning, if this theory holds true. Fear defiles corpses willingly. Fear describes her role as deathbed companion in gentle terms, but the reality might be more disturbing. She might deliberately lie with corpses and perform acts that corrupt souls, framing violation as comfort. Her soft words could disguise someone who genuinely enjoys what she does. Roderica can see everyone's future deaths. Spirit Tuner. Roderica has sensitivity to spirits and death. Some theorize she can actually see how people will die, explaining her fearful warnings and her terror of her own fate. Every person she meets, she might be seeing their death simultaneously. Gowry isn't a glintstone sorcerer, but an insect hive mind. Gowry, Millicent's adoptive father, disappears when struck and reappears elsewhere. He might not be human at all, but a colony of rot-infected insects puppeting human form. This explains his strange behavior and his ability to survive being killed. You're destroying one instance of the hive mind, while the collective consciousness inhabits another. Millicent's sisters hunt her on Gowry's orders. Millicent's sisters appear to oppose her journey, but their behavior might be Gowry's manipulation. He could be orchestrating conflict between the sisters as an experiment, testing which will prove strongest and most suitable for whatever dark purpose he has planned. Seluvis's puppets are conscious but trapped. The people transformed into Seluvis's puppets might retain full consciousness, while losing all control of their bodies. They could be screaming inside their own heads while forced to perform whatever their controller demands, making their fate a living hell worse than death. Brother Corin's faith kills him. Brother Corin's absolute faith in the Golden Order might literally be what destroys him. Upon witnessing Goldmask's revelations about fundamental flaws in the Order, the cognitive dissonance could be so severe it causes his death. His faith is so complete that evidence contradicting it becomes lethal. Tanith eats Rykard to preserve him. After Rykard's defeat, Tanith begins eating his corpse in a disturbing scene. Rather than madness or devotion gone wrong, some theorize she's trying to preserve his essence within herself, believing that by consuming him, she can keep some part of him alive and potentially resurrect him later. The loathsome Dung Eater's victims suffer forever. The curse the Dung Eater inflicts doesn't just affect one life but condemns entire bloodlines to eternal suffering that persists beyond death and carries to descendants. Every person he defiles creates a cascade of agony stretching forward through all time and all their potential offspring. Alexander the Warrior, Jar absorbs. Personalities. Iron Fist. Alexander is friendly and honorable, but living jars absorb warriors they consume. Alexander might contain fragments of countless absorbed personalities, meaning his cheerful demeanor could be a dominant personality that's suppressing dozens of screaming consciousnesses trapped inside him. Selen's transformation was self-inflicted. Sorceress. Selen's transformation into a school of graven mages might not have been punishment, but her deliberate goal. She might have wanted to achieve this form, seeing it as evolution or a path to greater magical power, making her fate not tragedy, but twisted success. Bernal hunts. Tarnished who remind him of himself. Recusant Bernal opposes those who would become Elden Lord because he was once like them. His bitterness at his own failure might drive him to kill Tarnished, who show potential he once had, unable to tolerate watching others achieve what he couldn't. Each murder is killing the person he used to be. The Volcano Manor's recusants are already dead. Everyone in Volcano Manor might have already died and been resurrected by Rykard's power, living as animated corpses serving the Serpent God. Their casual discussion of assassination and their strange behavior could reflect beings no longer truly alive going through motions without genuine humanity. Latenna can't actually be saved. Latenna, the Albinoric woman, asks you to take her to the Halig Tree, but her quest offers no real resolution or salvation. Some theorize reaching her destination changes nothing because there's no cure or help waiting there. Her entire journey is futile, and she knows it, but clings to false hope. Raya learns the truth and chooses death. Raya discovers her true nature as Rykard's creation and the horror of her origins. Depending on player choices, she can be given a tonic that might mean her death. Some interpretations suggest she consciously chooses death over living with the knowledge of what she is, finding oblivion preferable to truth.